We can tell stories from every corner of the world.
The sheer breadth of the collection is the thing that gives it its importance.
You see the pieces, you see the quality of the pieces. It's incredible that they all came together in this collection.
This area down at Kew Bridge, absolute heart of Layton country. He would have known this stretch of river extremely well. His family had lived here for generations. Layton moved to 5 Kew Bridge Road, and that's where he centred his operations for decades. Imagine the river. Back at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, it was a very, very productive area of river. During the river dredging, during the river works, during the bridge construction, vast numbers of objects were dredged out of the river, taken from the river, and many of them found their way ultimately into Layton's collection. The river is, even today, still giving up treasures, because we've just walked along the foreshore here out at Kew Bridge and picking up this fragment of probably 18th century, big 18th century cooking pot. So the stuff is still turning up, as it would have done back in Layton's day, and now found their way into the Museum of London. The Layton Collection is just an extraordinary assemblage of artefacts put together by Thomas Layton, a Victorian trader and gentleman of Brentford during the 19th century.
We know he becomes elected as a Fellow of the Society of Antiquaries, and this would have been a very important step in terms of being seen as a serious collector.
And he ranged far and wide through the sale rooms, buying objects from dredger crews, from other collectors, and he put together an extraordinary collection which lived in his house until his death.
The Layton Collection's a very important collection because it is so vast. We have over 7,000 objects here that we look after at the museum for the Layton Trust.
It speaks to these two different collections in a way. They cover an enormous variety of different types of objects and from many, many different parts of the world, with prehistoric, Roman and later artifacts. Some of the finest pieces of prehistoric metalwork that we have surviving from London. And then we have this international collection of ethnography.
But also books, maps, coins, but an awful lot of militaria in particular, swords, edged weapons, that sort of material. Because there are so many spearheads in the river, they must be ritual objects offered to the river, an attempt to fight off the rising tide. The Thames was inundating the lower part of its valley. Bronze Age communities had no engineering solutions. The only thing left to them was to simply try and fight off the river using sympathetic magic. Layton doesn't seem to have confined himself to any particular field of collecting.
And when you see the pieces, you see the quality of the pieces, it's incredible that they all came together in this collection. And as such, offer us a fantastic opportunity to tell incredible stories, both about London, but about further afield as well. And in part, this was being done with an aim to create his own museum. So it's an incredibly varied collection. We've recently been doing some work on the ceramic collections of Layton, and this pot immediately struck me. It's an amazing piece, but of course the thing that kind of catches the eye is this tiny little figure of a monkey clinging to the handle. It's a stirrup spout bottle produced by the Chimu culture of Peru. The pot was probably produced sometime between around about 900 AD and 1470 when the Chimu were conquered by the Inca. I love this vessel. It's finding something from Peru in our stores here in London, that connection to the huge range that we find in Layton's collections.
The importance of the collection lies in its sheer breadth, because without that Layton collection, we would tell a very much less rich story about London's early past.
It gives us that view into Thomas Layton's taste and his inquiring mind. It also gives us a view into what people were interested in at the end of the 19th and 20th century when it came to antiquarianism. There was a desire for knowledge, there was a curiosity about objects, there was a sweeping of knowledge from the rest of the world to inform thinking. The Layton Collection's importance has increased, I believe, in recent years. Because he collected from everywhere, we can now reflect the diversity of London in the material that's held within the Layton Collection.
This object here has a very interesting story to it. It's a European replica made here in London of a traditional Maori fighting weapon called a patu. It was used by Maori warriors in hand-to-hand combat. I find this object particularly interesting because a lot of the material in the Layton collection, we don't know a lot of the background information to it. This one, because of the engraving, we know who made it, and we know that it links to that particularly exciting period of time of world exploration, scientific discovery.
Layton's collection has gained an increasing relevance for modern life because as we live in a more pluralistic, a more diverse London, we can tell stories from every corner of the world. We can reach out via the Layton Collection to all of these different communities in London.
When visitors come to the Museum of London and visit the London Before London Gallery, many of the finest pieces that they're seeing on display in the River Wall and in the other display cases come from the Layton Collection. And so the collection is allowing people a much better insight into what we know about the Bronze Age, about the Neolithic in London. And without these pieces, we wouldn't be able to tell as complete a story of London's prehistory.
There are so many more stories to be told using the Layton Collection about London's connections to the rest of the world. It's a global collection for a global city.
I think Layton would be quite pleased in a way that nowadays, if we mention Thomas Layton's name, we're talking about the collection that he left behind, and that's what we associate him with. And I think he probably would quite like that legacy.